Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Sanctum. My name is Jesse, and I'm the writer, director, and narrator for the Lost Codex episodes. We're about to go into an interview with Alex Frasiabi and Patrick Dawson. This interview is actually happening at the same time as the What's Next panel, so there may be some information that may overlap, that may kind of have something to do with something we talk about. We don't have access to that panel right now, but we do have a one-on-one with Alex himself, one of the top story guy on the team, and Patrick Dawson, who is one of the top system guys on the team. We're going to ask him a whole bunch of questions. The Discord, you guys pulled through with questions. Twitter pulled through with questions. So we're going to try to get through. I have 20 questions here. We're going to try to get through as many as we can. No guarantee that we can, but here we go. We're going to dive right into the questions. Enjoy. I'm sitting with Patrick Dawson here on the left and Alex Frasiabi here on the right, and I got a whole bunch of questions from our Discord community and Twitter community. So we're just going to dive right in. Let's start with Sethrak, and where did the Sethrak come from? And there's some implication that they may be related to trolls, or they were once trolls. Do we have any information on the early Sethrak of where they came from?
They were not once trolls.
Okay, they weren't.
Many thousands of years ago, as it were. Surprise. Actually, we as we were creating this, we said it can't be 10,000 again. It's got to be like 12.
Anyway,
mix the number.
13.4 or
something like that. The trolls of the region and the Sethrak actually lived in harmony.
Okay.
They had a Loa known as Sethralus, who so as we talk about trolls and the different entities that exist on Zandalar and the different locations, they all have these representations of gods or deities, Loa, as it were. And Sethralus was the Loa that kind of represented this region of Zandalar that was lush and beautiful and amazing. And, and they lived in harmony together. And that is when, now of course at some point the old gods began their assault on the planet, and that is when this region fell. This is when the first of the Mytharics level of entities began to charge through the land. And this is when Mithrax itself was charged to come and take this part of the world. And that's when Sethralus stepped in. This huge battle ensued. And as I always described it, I wanted this King Kong-like battle where this beautiful, amazingly powerful snake Loa kind of entwined itself around this massive old god minion. And this huge battle ensued in which the old god took some chunks out of Sethralus, the minion rather. But Sethralus kind of dug her fangs right into the side of Mithrax, and then basically it fell, and then it kind of went back to its lair this is where it was worshipped, and from there it died, and around that the city, the temple city now kind of formed around it. But of course, in Sethralus dying and all of the terrible cataclysmic things that happened in the region as the years progressed, the region fell to be this desolate desert. And this is when most of the trolls left, and this is why it became kind of this land of exiled trolls. We can't really live there. But we can send our criminals there. And of course, the Sethrak thrived in that environment, so they managed to continue to survive and thrive and live in this holiest of holy grounds for them.
And so was that before or after the Troll and Akir war that's mentioned in Chronicle? That was probably after that, after the Zandalar had kind of...
I would say it's during it.
Same time. So Mithrax was a general in that same war.
Exactly.
Okay, so that was the same time. Okay, cool. Question for you. There's the achievement system in game is a massive system, and in both in terms of like the trackable achievements, but there's also and I don't use this word offensively, the nonsense statistics in the background of how many miles have you fallen, or how many deaths do you have to Hogger. What does that spreadsheet look like? Like if you were to, those useless facts of how many hot dogs it would take to go around the world. I can't even imagine those numbers, and that question really stood out to me, and it's just this seething curiosity that I have.
The statistics were simply born out of the criteria for the achievements themselves. We found that if we're tracking that you've killed an Ixia to award you an achievement for it, why don't we just track how many times you've killed an Ixia? We're already tracking it. It's just a number at that point. And in fact, I remember when I was developing the achievement system, it was alongside Jeff Kaplan, who came to me and said, okay, basic achievement, kill an Ixia. I'm like, okay, well then that makes sense. So you have an achievement, which is a container, and we'll make a criteria. And a criteria is an event. It's something that happens, and we can make it sort of polymorphic, like kill is the action, and then the creature ID for Onyxia is the target, right? So that way you could do a lot of things and add these quickly, like win a battleground of Arathi Basin. So you always have like a subject and an object as the language of what a criteria is for an achievement, and then an achievement is an interpretation of those criteria. Right. And then we took it one step further and said, what if it was kill Onyxia while you were drunk? So now we have the concept of state and modifiers. So we added a modifier system, which was similar in the language of like subject and object, like while drunk, so intoxication level is 100%. And from that, this powerful system was created where we could track almost anything in the game and award you an achievement for doing something that, in many ways is kind of like directed gameplay that's not directly story related. Right. Statistics.
Fun little background
stuff. Yeah, and so statistics were simply, okay, from all those criteria that we have the ability to track all that. Why don't we display it to the players? It might be interesting to some people to figure out like how many times they've used a certain bandage or a health potion or what food they've eaten the most. So why not?
It's a really cool system. I can't even imagine the sheer amount of numbers per character, per account, and just... Thank you for answering that.
It's pretty big.
Back to you, Alex. One of the biggest questions I had after leveling through Kul'Tiras was who and what are the Drust? There's a lot of implications that they're related to the Vrykul, their buildings, the architect, the naming conventions, the runes. But in the flashback events in game, they're depicted as really tall humans with sort of like tribal gear. Can you give us any indication on who the Drust? Because I think the only Drust that we see that's still a Drust is the old bear up in the mountains.
Right.
And Gorak Tul, of course, and he's got this, he's unique as the leader, but he looks very Vrykul in this sort of horrifying, undead, creepy tree kind of way.
Definite relation to Vrykul.
Definite relation.
Yeah, I mean, putting it, just cutting to the chase, yes. And of course the Vrykul, as the world had shattered and separated out and what have you, were kind of scattered as well, right? And of course, as a seafaring race, they've also taken to the waters and the waves and gone to different locations as well. So, we want to see the original inhabitants of this place, or some sect or some tribe of Vrykul before the Kul'Tiras arrived some 2,000 plus years ago. Some great battle ensued, and of course, whether or not their intentions were good for us themselves, we ended up with the situation we're in today, damning themselves to the darkest of dark. And the death realms, or whatever that might be, which is kind of an offshoot of the dream or the nightmare itself, of course, and damning all of their people to the same fate. But yes, I think it's no coincidence that they look the way they do.
Okay, cool. What is Thros? We know last year it was at Blizzcon, I believe they described it as a spirit realm where the Drust took refuge. Gorak Tul calls it a prison that he sort of breaks out. Is it sort of like a realm, kind of like the Legion, where you kill a demon within the Twisting Nether and he's dead permanently, or is it something we've never seen before?
No, we've seen it before, and it's interesting because areas in our world are described by the creatures that inhabit them from their own perspective.
Right.
Like if you don't know what the nightmare or the dream or some fellscape in the Nether or whatever that might be is, like if you just do not have that knowledge, because why would you? If you're just an average, ordinary Drust citizen,
right,
or some Kul'Tiran that just likes to fish, you make up your own mythos for those places.
Okay.
And that's why you start to tend to kind of get a different understanding from the Drust themselves, even as to what this place is. It's a prison. It's a land of the damned or of the dead. Where I hear these crazed whispers that compel me to do these various things. But if you kind of unpack the lore. We're not going to create 50 different
pocket realms.
Yeah, because I actually think that's kind of that just becomes complicated and difficult to explain. But what I actually do like is when you take a set or a subset of creatures or entities and they exist and have existed on their own within this place, or they invoke something like the nightmare itself to come out to defeat or to strike down their enemies, right? To call to the dark gods, and the dark gods listen in our game, in our world, right? And when you do, you better expect someone to come at your door and say, "Hey, you called?" And in this case, someone did. Yeah, it's time to pay up, and we take a pound of our flesh. We will take our pound of flesh, or 5 as it stands, and so yeah, absolutely. It's a place that exists already. We know it to be the nightmare. But do all of the denizens of this area know it that way? Not necessarily. They don't need to. It's not necessarily important.
Right.
The effect or end result is the same.
Okay.
Right? It's a horrific nightmare. It's a land of death, decay, and nightmare.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. I find there's a huge increase in the scenario and dungeons, specifically with the Battle for Lordaeron, with just the sheer scale of NPCs in that. I did it first on my Horde character, and I ran out and seeing pretty much what we saw in the cinematic, the massive field. It was unlike any other scenario I've kind of been in. And it got me thinking, what kind of changes have gone into the scenario or dungeon system that allow for the hundreds of troops to be there, or even in the Zandalar Forever scenario where everyone's attacking, climbing to get to Zul at the top, there's battles going on in the distance that you can't physically get to, but you can see Kimball ripping into X target, or you can see Paku flying around and stuff, and it makes it feel, it's not just a linear siege that you're doing. There's a whole battle going on around you. What kind of system changes have gone into the scenarios like this that allow for this grand scale epic scene that we see like in the Battle for Lordaeron trailer?
So there's two main components to performance, which is the server performance and the client performance. And you can't really do one without the other, right? Like we've had times where we've changed the way we do like area of interest calculations or how we do object updates from the server to the client to increase server performance. But if we don't do that same work on the client, then our client can't keep up with the new ability we have on the server. So we spend a pretty equal amount of time. We have a group that focuses on server performance and a group that focuses on client performance. And then we do tricks, okay? So an example of this is if there's NPCs that you shouldn't or can't interact with, or they're in the distance, we actually don't spawn them on the server. We have a technology called client scenes. And what that does is that allows us to create this facade of creatures that are actively fighting. They look like they're at war. I think one of the first times we used it was in the Siege of Orgrimmar, when you're kind of going through from the docks to the front gate of Orgrimmar, and you see the Night Elves and the Orcs all fighting around everywhere. Those don't actually exist on the server. You can't actually interact with them, but because you can't get to it, you'll never know. So that's like a trick that we'll use. But in addition to that, every time we release a new expansion, we'll focus heavily on like, how can we do more? How can we get more? We'll challenge ourselves and give ourselves goals of what if we got 100 players in an area? What if we can get 150 players in an area? How do we make that happen? And that's both from the server aspect and the client aspect.
Cool. I asked this question last year. Now that we have kind of a better understanding of the allied race, what designates a race to be an allied race? Does it follow, like, you got Tauren, High Mountain Tauren, Lightforge, and regular Draenei? Is there a sort of pattern, or could there be a curveball like Mok'Nathal or Vrykul, or are you guys focusing on kind of sticking to a pattern?
There's no pattern.
No pattern.
We're just crazed, bloodlust driven.
Throwing them out.
I think what we want to chase is what's cool.
Right.
And what, in a lot of cases, is contextually appropriate from a timeline perspective.
Right.
So mainly what's cool. Now, are there other hurdles or difficulties for us to overcome whenever we're creating a new player race? Because at the end of the day, that's exactly what an allied race is. And the answer is yes, of course. We need to have an animation rig and animations done, and player, surprise to nobody, I hope, player character animations are the largest number of animations in our database, our player data, our character database, right? Because they need all of these different animations for a player to be, like, you need to be able to walk backwards, you need to be able to shuffle to the left or to the right or to the side. And so anytime we invoke an allied race, that race needs to be able to have all of those animations to support all of the possible player class and combinations that we can kind of invoke. So that is a limitation to some degree, but that does not mean that we're not going to make, like the large Kul'Tiran male and female that are now allied races that we just talked about, I believe. Those are pretty much just new rigs. And what that means is they're new skeletons that we've reanimated or animated. Sure, they may have some of the older human animations, which, by the way, they're human, so it would make perfect sense.
Right.
But they also have a whole bunch of new animations that we put in. So it's a matter of just timing and passion and excitement as to if we want to do this or not. So, as allied races come online now and in the future, I think that there's always going to be a number of factors that come into play.
Cool.
Yeah.
Quick question. I don't know if this is answered down at the panel downstairs, but is there any reason the Kul'Tiras humans can't be mages? I mean, our girl Jaina.
we're gonna have this. We're gonna talk about it again.
Okay, all right.
That's what I'm gonna tell you.
Okay.
You're gonna hear different. I'm gonna just tell you. Here's your Lost Codex exclusive. I'm with you.
You agree?
I'm with
You agree?
I'm
Okay,
with you.
okay.
But
That's
I'm one voice.
right.
I'm loud though, and I can be snarky. No, you know what? And we've gone back and forth on this. I think part of it is always going to be, well, how do they look when they're in the midst of doing this thing that is integral to the class, like spellcasting?
Right.
And
because shamans were announced, and that's cool. You know, water weaving, like that. That makes sense.
All good. And so I agree, and I would say, look, if you got Jaina Proudmoore, is probably the most powerful mage on Azeroth. She's a Kul'Tiran. By golly,
Why?
I've never used that in my life. But by golly, the other
Exclusive
Kul'Tirans
here.
should be
Agreed.
mages as well.
Agreed.
I may lose this battle, by the way, but I do want to say that I agree that and this is just to show you, like, you know, we're passionate developers, and
Right.
we don't all come out and like a bunch of automatons that are all looking at the same thing and agreeing about the same thing.
Right.
We all have our different opinions.
Okay.
I cannot promise you that Kul'Tirans will be mages.
Okay.
I cannot make that promise, but what I can promise you is that we'll have the discussion.
Okay.
And, you know, maybe they can, maybe they will, maybe they won't. Maybe at some future date down the line, we'll have some quest line where Jaina comes down and admonishes Blizzard staff and says, I'm kidding.
Proves them all wrong.
I'd make that quest myself.
Just to spite everyone else.
No, but I think that it's always something that we should be talking about and discussing. And we don't do anything out of spite. We do things out of passion and love for the game.
Right.
Even not allowing Kul'Tirans to be mages.
Fair enough.
Damn it, why?
Fair enough.
Well, we want to get it right, and
We do.
healthy disagreements is how we really iterate and just really come to the right answer.
It's
So
part of development. So
I'm not sure we have a final answer to
Okay.
it, right? Like,
All right, I agree.
That's-
we'll talk
Things
about
can
it.
change, but if we do allow Kul'Tirans to be mages, guess what? Zandalari's going to be paladins. So
Oh.
you're gonna have. No, I'm kidding.
the comments on
I
this
know,
video
just,
are
like,
going.
The Discord is blown up. Everyone is just crying.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. Please, that's not true.
Funny you say that because the next question is about Zandalari Paladins.
Yeah.
I asked you last year, and it was kind of it's been a hot topic over the last year.
Sure.
And I don't know what they announced downstairs, but is there anything you can tease or elaborate on who they call upon for their powers? Since our big boy Razan bit the bullet, do they talk about it? I don't know what they talked about downstairs. Can you tease us on anything about that?
Not really.
Not really. Okay, fair enough.
really.
On the topic of Loa, there's quite a few Loa that are lost during the Zandalar campaign. We got Razan, Hyreek, and Shadra. Are they permanently dead? How does that work? Because we've seen Wild Gods come back.
Exactly.
So is there ever a case where, because I believe when Shadra is killed, Yasma yells, die forever. And was she just being dramatic?
Yasma talks a lot.
She's just a
lot of
talker.
Garbage.
Okay.
Quite honestly.
All right.
I'm glad we put an end to her.
Thank God. She was
I know, right?
The final motto was creepy.
I know. I'd say I don't say animal gods are forever.
Right.
But they're a primal force of the cosmos to
Right.
some degree, or represent that in some fashion, form. So even seeing, why cannot remember the turtle Loa's name now?
Torga, actually,
Torga.
yeah. He reincarnates at the very end.
Embarrassing for me. Right, exactly, right?
Yeah.
We see a reincarnation of Torga happen, and I think that is well within the realm of Loa. I
Okay.
think that you can absolutely see things like that happen. And we might.
Cool. A lot of feedback has been given in terms of the 8.1 quest line, and in the last couple beta builds, we've seen a lot of reworks on the storylines. It frustrates me when people say, Blizzard's not listening, but clearly you guys are, because the feedback's, the change has been there. How does that process work, whether it's for systems, mechanics, classes, story, and is there a best or more efficient way for players to give feedback, aside from being dickbags and yelling on the internet?
I didn't say that.
No, I did. That was me.
Was not. That's ventriloquism stuff. Our players are passionate because they love the game.
Right.
And we understand that. At the end of the day, there aren't people out there being spiteful or hateful because they're just spiteful or hateful.
Right.
They hate us. I mean, maybe they're, I don't know, but they're not the ones that are
That love the game.
voices and
Right.
that we listen. I think, and so anytime we any kind of debate or conversation pops up, we're listening, we're looking on the matter of, and we're always talking, by the way, right?
Right.
And we'll have conversations. We have two different jobs, Pat and I do, completely different
Right.
in the things that we do. But we both share something in common, which is a love for World of Warcraft.
Right.
And our opinions about certain aspects of the game will be different.
Right.
But we'll have these conversations and about story, about game systems, about content systems, about whatever it might be. And at the end of the day, we collaborate and we work together to come to some kind of a resolution. When we're talking about something like a choice moment that has happened, or that we went back and we did a revision on,
right.
The reality is World of Warcraft historically has not been a narrative choice-driven game.
Right.
There are many choices you do make in World of Warcraft. The faction you play, the race you play, the class you play. Those are very big and meaty and meaningful choices. And when I say meaningful, very intentionally, because choices need to be meaningful, otherwise they are pointless or aimless.
Right.
And thus their impact is lessened or diminished dramatically.
Right.
And so to make content that is story content, for example, to be meaningful, it has to have a resolution, or has to resolve in a way that is meaningful.
Right.
And so if you think about, I'm going to give you a choice beyond accept or decline for this bare-ass quest.
Right.
Okay? I'll give you a choice. That choice has to be something that has a result that matters.
Right.
Because otherwise, why did I give you the choice in the first place? All I actually did is made your life more confusing and complex by virtue of having to make a choice, and certainly made the lives of the developer more complex, because now we have to implement the choice.
Right.
Right? Which means more quests, more content, more logic.
Right.
That has to now go into the development. Which is one of the main driving factors as to why in a game where we've got tens of thousands of quests and other activities, why choice isn't necessarily in the foreground, because that does add another vector of complexity that we have to account for and make meaningful, because we don't do things in this game that aren't meaningful.
Right.
And I stand by that. Yes, certainly there's going to be times when you feel like, this is like the 8th bare-ass quest I'm on, and I don't feel great about this. And I feel like we need to look at those as developers and go, we shouldn't do that. But when it comes to something like this, we really did think about it, we talked about it, and initially the thought was there are people that are going to be loyal to Sylvanas, that no matter what she does, they're going to want to follow her.
Right.
And then there are people that are going to be loyal to the old horde and the old ways and honor and virtue. And am I making this sound, is this bias happening?
No,
not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. No, and they should also be able to take their story in a different direction. And we said, this is probably a good place to do this. And then we went back on it and we said, look, if we go down this path, that means we have to deliver. Because you can't just go in the Tides of Vengeance content update, we're going to give you this choice, and then you can choose to betray Sylvanas, or you can choose to betray Sarfang, and then have it be meaningless.
Right.
Because P.S., the story's not over.
Right.
Right, as we can clearly see.
Right.
So then what does that mean for us? Well, now we need to have two timelines. We have to have two story narrative lines that we have to pursue, and we have to make sure that we're doing both of them justice. So now the loyalists to Sylvanas need to have their own line, and the loyalists to Sarfang and the old honor-bound horde need to have their own line, right? Which I actually think is awesome, which I think is super cool.
Something that's never been done.
It's just something that's never been done in World of Warcraft.
Right.
It's been done in a lot of games in a lot of different ways.
Cool.
So that's really where that stems from. And so for us, this is a bit of a test to see how far we can take this. And, I push back as far as take it all the way. Right? And delete your characters. The losing side, you're done.
You're gone.
And Pat keeps telling me we can't do that. And I keep saying we can do whatever we want. But he keeps saying we shouldn't. So I'm gonna err on the side of professionalism and say we shouldn't.
Fair enough. To speak to the feedback part of it real quick as well, not only do we read forums, listen to the communities, understand what's happening, but one of the most powerful and inspirational pieces of feedback we actually got to take us down this path were when people removed their shoulder pads. That was a big moment, and that wasn't in a forum, that wasn't talks, that was a really powerful moment when the community just said, we want a choice. And this is how we're going to make that choice. Right. Mm-hmm. And what better way for us than to actually deliver that fantasy of saying, okay, we heard you. We want to give you that choice in game.
Of course, High Elves came up as a topic, and I kind of agree that Void Elves kind of fill that void where the High Elves are. But is there any chance that there could be future customization for Void Elves, do skin color or hair color change to kind of almost give the High Elf feeling?
I'd say yes, there's always a chance.
There's always a chance.
There's always a chance. Don't give up hope.
Don't give up hope.
But just be respectful when you make your posts.
Right. That's it. That's key. Are there any plans to change how heritage armor is unlocked for future allied races now that we see the regular races?
Always a chance.
Always a chance. Okay.
I think it's always something we're looking at. Yes.
Cool. Random question from Legion, but what was the purpose of the Titan structure beneath the Tomb of Sargeras? This has been bothering me for 2 years. Can we know?
Yes, but I think we're out of time. I'll be perfectly honest with you, I'd have to look at my notes.
Okay.
It's been a long time, and I'm trying to remember, but I think that I had a very specific reason for doing it that way.
Right.
And then I'm embarrassed to say I don't actually remember. You know how much lore has to be kept in this head?
That's okay. That's okay.
Lord.
I'm going to tweet at you in about 20 minutes, and we're going to check your notes. And the last question I have is, I really like the alternate Draenor storyline, and I was super happy to go back for the Magar.
Good.
That portal's closed when we evacuate, we run, Yrel's chasing us. Do you think there's a good chance that we can ever see High Exarch Yrel and all that again? Or is it kind of, that portal was the last kind of flicker?
There's a chance.
Okay.
There's always a chance.
There's always a chance.
I think, and honestly, it's funny. Like when it comes down to storylines like this, it's so dependent on the developer pushing forth that story. Like, what is someone passionate about?
Right.
Wrathion would have never existed if there weren't two very passionate designers that wanted to push the story forward.
Right.
For me, Sarafang was just an NPC I put in, and that I just wanted a badass orc that represented kind of the epitome of what that would mean, and also someone that would call out your name when Onyxia was slain.
Right.
But I kept running with it, he was really cool. We'll put him in Encourage during the opening. He'll be kind of the commander of the forces of Kalimdor, right?
And he's evolved into what he's now.
And exactly. And honestly, every story, holistically, kind of like all of our best stories, evolve that way in a very holistic fashion. If someone's passionate about it, they'll push that, and they'll push it, and they'll push it. And we're open enough, and we're collaborative enough where there's no singular overlord of like, it must be this way.
Right.
We really have creative and awesome people that develop our story. And if someone wants to run with that, I promise you they will. And I'm not going to stand in their way. I mean, maybe a little bit, but no.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah. So I think that's really how things come to be.
All right, cool.
Hey guys, we just wrapped up our interview with Alex Frasiabi and Patrick Dawson, and it was awesome. We didn't get through all the questions, so I kind of selectively chose certain questions that I wanted answered. Hopefully next time we'll be able to get them all answered, but they were extremely in-depth questions, so I didn't expect to get through all 20 of them. I hope you guys enjoyed the special exclusive interview that we had with Alex and Patrick, and I hope that we got to answer some of the questions you wanted to know. We're going to go enjoy the rest of our BlizzCon, and let us know if your thoughts, comments on what we got answered, and hopefully we get to do this again with Alex and Patrick next year, because it was awesome. Thank you to the Blizzard PR team and everyone else involved who got us this interview, and thank you to Alex and Patrick for answering the questions. It was really cool to get an inside look at all the information. And we'd be happy to do it again. So thank you guys. And for all those at BlizzCon or watching BlizzCon online, enjoy the rest of your con. We'll see you guys after.